Now I'd like to invite to the stage David Smith and Adam Riley. They're going to explore the essential skills that insights professionals need to excel in the AI era. It is likely to cover related topics like interpretation and really making informed decisions when you're using the tool. Welcome to the stage, Adam.
Good morning. This is quite disconcerting presenting when no one can actually sort of hear me speak. Everyone is listening through headphones. So, thank you. We're here this morning in the AI arcade, and we're going to be talking about how to survive AI. And what really strikes me when we think about this is how quickly this technology has moved from the kind of the quixotic to the plausible to the almost inevitable in a very short space of time. I was round the corner about half an hour ago just working on my notes, and there was a gentleman looking at the booths, and he was kind of bemoaning, rather sort of in an exasperated fashion, how everything was AI nowadays. Well, realistically, nowadays for most of us is since last November. November the 30th, 2022 was when ChatGPT was released. And it's just amazing what we can now do with this. Yeah, so we could have had this presentation written by AI. We could have an AI avatar on the screen that looked like David and I, that spoke like David and I, and delivered this presentation. In terms of this Congress, we didn't actually need to be here. You know, we are largely redundant. And that's quite a disconcerting train of thought. And what I wanted to do was just take a quick poll of hands amongst this group of people. How many of you feel slightly uncomfortable about the direction of travel with AI and what this means for you in the next year? So just a show of hands. Anyone here uncomfortable about where AI may take us? We got one, we got two, three. Not many. I'm very uncomfortable about it, to be honest. And the reason that we're uncomfortable, the reason I'm uncomfortable about this, is because when we think about AI, we think about how it will develop. It's very difficult to fathom, and it's difficult to fathom because it's characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But we may have an opportunity. The fact that AI has become part of the lexicon so profoundly and so quickly means that we realize now that, unlike the proverbial frog in boiling water, we actually have an opportunity, maybe a brief opportunity, but we do have an opportunity to do something about it. In his book, Why the West Rules for Now, historian, archaeologist, I think part-time anthropologist Ian Morris argues that human progress is almost invisible until it isn't. And he has one of our favorite charts. Population on the right, recorded kind of human history across the bottom, and on the left-hand axis, he has an aggregate measure called the Human Social Development Index, which is basically capturing energy capture, so per person calories, organization, he's using a proxy of the size of the cities, our capacity to make war, and the diffusion of tools for processing and sharing information. And what Morris does with this is pinpoint the moment when he says that the trajectory of human development changed profoundly. And in his analysis, that moment was in 1775 with the invention of Watt's steam engine. Now, we would argue that we are at another Watt's, the 30th of November 2022 is another Watt steam engine moment. Now, I've been in and around market research for the last 30 years, and transformation is nothing new. We've seen all sorts of developments come along. The exponential growth in data, the amount of data and the sources of data that we have. Processing power, which has fundamentally changed the kind of the back office function, the back office capabilities, and a plethora of tools and applications available to us. But what makes me uncomfortable is that what's now coming looks nothing like the transformation of the last 30 years in scale. It's a quantum change. AI is going to affect everything we do. Now, there is a school of thought that says as long as we know how to use AI, all will be okay. You can see this is a quote from IBM, but there are lots of academics and commentators who make roughly the same point. This provides hope, but I think it also deflects from the scale of the challenge. 80 years ago, Keynes introduced this idea of technological unemployment, and that is our capacity for economizing on labor, outrunning our ability to create new uses for that labor. And he was just reiterating a point made by David Ricardo in 1820, talking about the first industrial revolution. And what's interesting about the hopeful view of AI is that it assumes that AI remains a technology that needs significant human input. Now, as a counter to that, OpenAI, the progenitor of ChatGPT, argue that initially jobs may be lost to someone who knows how to use AI. But this is just an interregnum before it is lost to AI. AI will take out tasks, jobs, roles, and then industries. This is a quote from a guy called Eric Brynjolfsson. He wrote The Second Machine Age, and he's a professor at the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI. I don't think he's telling you anything that isn't obvious here, but there is no law that says as technology develops, we are all going to benefit. Some people, many people, maybe a majority of people will be worse off. So, for 18th century handloom weavers who lost out to the industrialization of the textile industry, in the 21st century we can think accountants, solicitors, copywriters, possibly market researchers. And what makes this technological change so concerning is that we are moving from a situation where technology is an enabler to where technology is a substitute. It is no longer helping us do our job better, it is just doing our job. So I want to just, before I hand over to David, I just want to ask a question. So look around. There are probably 30 people here listening to this. Have a think about this. In 10 years' time, what percentage of the audience, of the ESMAR audience, won't be here because of AI? What do you think? Now, given how comfortable the majority of us were, it'd be interesting to see what the answer is. But we're going to try with a show of hands. So how many people think that it will take out less than 10%? Figure 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. 10 to 50%. Ooh, yeah. More than 50%. 1. Okay. So what we then think is that up to 50% of us won't be here in 10 years' time because we will have been replaced by AI. So the question is, what do we need to do to be part of the 50% who are here in 10 years' time? That's what David is going to talk to. David.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah. Thanks, Adam. So we've set this up as Adam's there as a sort of bad cop to kind of tell us that we've really got to think about this stuff. I'm here as the good cop to sort of take you through a path of thinking that I think will mean that us as insight professionals can really excel. The point I want to make is we're not kind of AI technical experts here. We're really pick up on this conversation in terms of what kind of human skills we need to work alongside AI. So we've identified 7 what we've called kind of superpowers that we feel that we as insight professionals, if we acquire these, this will put us in a really strong position to actually navigate the next 5 years or so. So what I'm going to do is just paint a little picture of each of these 7. Obviously, each one we could spend hours and hours talking about them, but I'm just going to paint a little picture, tell a few stories about each one that I think is important for us to actually acquire. So the first is this concept of the sense maker. So what do I mean by that? You see a reference up there to the idea of the wide angle lens, and we got that off of years ago. There was a program called The West Wing, and this guy rushes in and says, "I've just been made a presidential advisor. What does that mean?" And the guy says, "Well, what it means is you've got to tell the president what's happening in Ukraine." I've updated it. What that means for your policy in terms of China, how that's affecting agricultural policy in the Midwest, whether I can get those jobs in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and are we going to win Georgia and Florida in the 2024 election? And there's a pause. He says, "You are his wide-angle lens." And that's a very important skill, I think, for insight professionals. And there's a quote there from Isaiah Berlin, which I like, which is the idea of visionary leaders have this ability to work out what fits with what springs from what, and what leads to what. So if you have got that holistic skill, I think you're going to be in demand. AI can do some of the heavy lifting, but if you can actually have that contextual picture, without being a self-publicity, back in 2004, years ago, I wrote a book called The Art and Science of Interpreting Market Research Evidence, and in there I had a framework called the weight, power and direction of evidence. And the weight is about the relationship between qualitative and quantitative evidence. Power is about our intuitive understanding of data and the more classic methodology we use. And direction was all about internal and external consistency. And I think that sort of went over a lot of people's heads all those years ago. But I think that's now the way we need to look at all these kind of complex data sets. So I think the people that are in demand are going to be people that can bring this kind of contextual skill to what we do. So that's number one, sense maker. In terms of the second one, critical thinking, nothing new here. I do a lot of work for a university, and employers have always been saying, give us people that have got critical thinking skills. But I think the shift is going to be that AI is going to do a lot of the deductive, logical reasoning, and also a lot of the inductive reasoning, the ability to look at patterns of data and raise it to some kind of explanation about what that means. But the tricky bit is going to be, sounds a bit funny word, abductive thinking, which is reasoning where there's an element of uncertainty and imperfection in the data. And it's funny, isn't it, we think of like Sherlock Holmes as being a great detective, and he's got that phrase, "It's elementary, my dear Watson," implying that he arrives at the conclusion through deductive, logical reasoning. But it's more about the mind palace bit of that, isn't it? There's this little bit of magic going on that is more intuitive, that it comes out of that kind of abductive reasoning. And another, looking at time, another quick example of that will be Alan Turing, who cracked the Enigma code. It's partly around being a mathematical genius, but it's also around that intuitive understanding of how people would use code books and so on and so forth. So that's the second skill. Moving on to the third, which we've labelled the creative edge. Coco Chanel once said, if you want to be irreplaceable, be different. So we're really going to have to up our game in terms of that ability to differentiate. And here we can see early versions of the idea of creative prompting with like David Bowie and Brian Eno working with, Oblique Strategies, to where, I don't know, you're familiar with that, where they'd have a little box and they'd pick out a thing that says, okay, well done, Bowie, you've done that song. Now play it in, take out the middle eight, change the coda. So it gives it, so it's prompting them to be more creative. So I think we're going to get more of that prompting, but there's still going to be that extra leap that we've got to make. And rather salutary tale here, about 3 years ago, Adam and I did a $1 million study, a massive segmentation, so a sort of dream study for insight professionals to get all around the world. It's all to do with finance. And we reckon that of that $1 million now, 900,000, in a few years' time, will be done by the AI. So the creative bit on that job we did was the thing that will now be of most value, which was we ended up with a model about helping people understand finance through it. Well, I haven't got time to go into it. The idea of people having goals, outlook and control. So there's a lot behind that, but it was quite a powerful model. And we'd like to think that if you said to AI, come up with that model, they'd be able to go a long way towards what we did, but they wouldn't be able to have that model, which I could talk about afterwards, that we actually created as a denouement for that particular study. The next, is this notion of forward thinking. Now, the kind of big idea here is that there's a book I suggest you get hold of. It's called Invention of Tomorrow, and it's by a guy called Suddendorf, and he's arguing that quite a unique human skill is this ability to empathize with the past and project forward about what we as humans want into the future. And I was sort of thinking, I need an example of that. And in the UK at the moment, we've got this debate going on about whether school roofs are going to collapse in and all the children are going to die and whatever. And I'm old enough to remember a terrible tragedy in the UK called the Aberfan disaster, where 144 children died when a kind of slag heap arrived on. And I thought, yeah, that's it, isn't it? I've got these visceral memories of that particular incident, and that helps me carry forward into how I would think about that issue now and the decisions that I would actually make. So I'm just going to have a sip of water. Yeah, so what that means is that Adam and I do a lot of work on scenario planning, and in our model we've got a 3 arrows in time model of predicting possible plausible futures, and in there's the notion of the past catching us up. Well, AI can do a lot of that. They can do a lot of that trend work. Then there's the idea of the accelerating present, the idea of looking at what Zuckerberg or whatever's doing with the metaverse and actually projecting that forward. But the bit that's tricky, I think, for AI is the idea of looking at those uncertainties coming at us fast, and that ability to pick up experiences from the past and project those forward, I think, is going to be quite a key differentiating skill. Next up, storytelling. Now, when I was a boy researcher, all we did was turn up and present our research process. So we had little silos of data. I'm looking at Steve. I think we're all guilty of this. Hello, welcome. Here's the desk research. Hello. And now there's the qual. And here's the survey data. I'll leave you to sort out what all that means. Then we've all got quite good now at actually presenting the narrative. But I think AI is going to prompt us to up our game even further. And I was looking at something from William Morris, who was William James, who was Henry James, the writer's brother, and he was an early polymath. So he was philosopher, psychologist, writer, and I came across this phrase. He said, we should be in the business of, the transmission of powerful psychological messages. So I think we've got to up our game from storytelling. And if you wanted an exemplar, I mean, I know it's a big ask, but it's more about like Martin Luther King and the I Have a Dream speech and creating that architecture. So he had a clear sense of purpose. What did he want to achieve with this story? So we can't just live on, we're good at storytelling. It's going to be about actually really driving home that sort of powerful message. Next on this sort of whistle-stop tour of the life and times of the polymath, with decision making, I think a book that I'm currently reading is, Kahneman, who you know from Think Fast, Think Slow. He's got a book out over the last year called Noise, and it's quite a difficult read, but basically he's saying a lot of the disasters that we have with decision making, AI will help us with, because it'll look at what went wrong with this, and it will take a lot of noise and variability out of decision making. And and we can say, excuse me, I'm a good decision maker. I'm not going to let some robot do that for me. But I'm sort of listening to the Kahneman argument, and you get good examples there, don't you, from the world of like aviation. So if you were to take, we're all familiar with the Sullenberg landing of the plane in the Hudson. So you've got two voices going on, which is, if you're a pilot, listen to the AI, listen to the automation. You are spatially disorientated. Your judgment is wrong, wrong, wrong. Do not push that lever. Follow the technology. And there's another little voice, and I'm mixing examples here. Sullenberger said, yeah, but you know what? In my hobby, I was a glider pilot. So, okay, I'm listening to people saying land this aircraft, go back to LaGuardia. But I'm a glider pilot, so he brings that little bit of judgment and intuition to it. So I think the future there is actually working out, doing all the stuff Kahneman's saying about doing a noise audit and using the AI to take out the variability, but leaving that little bit of ourselves in there in terms of the decision making. Last one, inspiring action. Now when they do polls on who are the last people that we want to lose our job to AI. Top of the list are judges. No one wants to be sent to prison by a kind of robot, and then CEOs. No one wants to lose their job to some CEO avatar. And so we sort of get that, but so there's an area there, isn't it, where we do want personality, want celebrities. So an example would be, we could easily make the job of the newscaster done by AI. That could be easy, but we somehow want that personality of that newscaster to give us that kind of believability. And I think here, the idea of the polymath thinking is you're fusing ideas. That's the whole point about polymath thinking. So you've got like Seth Godin, who's got this really powerful idea of the linchpin, the idea that someone can walk into chaos and create order. So that's a kind of entrepreneurial idea. But I think if we are applying this idea of valuing ourselves as human beings, there's a whole movement, which I've been getting up to date with, around like compassionate leadership. And this isn't some sort of mushy idea of we're empathetic with people. It means compassion as not a passive thing, but a proactive thing to support what's happening. And it's a book I've got reference here called Sensitivity by Grunenberg and Solar, which is worth reading. So it's fusing those ideas, so we end up with operating a kind of leadership role that is going to be difficult for kind of AI to replicate. So you might think, well, it's all a bit of a big ask, this, but we can fall back on the comfort of the idea of, you're all familiar with like the T-shaped worker, that we all need to know a little bit about everything across the T, but we can have our own specialisms, yeah? But if I was to sort of a little bit more controversial, I think where we're at as an industry, I think we're relying a little bit too much on, well, I'll let all that stuff on the top happen elsewhere. I'll concentrate down the T in my little niche that might reflect the who put their hands up on the poll for Adam, but I think we do need, as an industry, to define ourselves as thinkers, yeah, around this notion of polymath thinking, but take comfort in the fact we can have specialisms kind of within that. So that's a very, very kind of a very, very high level canter through what I think the superpowers we should acquire, and that will give us a good future working alongside AI. I'm just going to hand over to Adam, who can put that in a bit more organisational context.
Slide. What we're not saying is this is going to be easy, that any kind of transformation is easy. There isn't a 45-minute online course that will turn you into a polymath. It is going to take sustained change over time, and also it's not just for an individual. So, we as consultants and researchers, we need to develop our skills. The organizations that we work in will need us to develop these skills, but also the organization has to change as well. So the systems, the processes, the way that organizations recruit, remunerate, reward, all of that is going to have to change to reflect the nature of the changing demand on us as human beings working alongside AI. Last appeal, we are really, really keen to hear from anyone who agrees with us or importantly disagrees with us. We would love to have a debate. We have a Substack called the Polymath Mind, where you can find all kinds of material that we've created on this topic. We would love to hear from anyone who would like to debate with us on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I move on, does anyone have any questions to ask Adam and David? I'm coming to you.
Thanks for that. Adam and David, thanks for that. I was one of the people who put up my hand on there'll be 50% of us, more than 50% won't be here. And I think you nailed it with all of those, there's 6 or 7 skills required. My depressing thought for some might be that most of those are not acquirable skills at this age of our life. So maybe the only hope for us is to invest in our children having those skills, because you can't just suddenly become a critical thinker or a sense maker or et cetera, et cetera. The same as I'm not going to open the batting for Australia at cricket anymore. I'm past my prime and past that opportunity. So that's my maybe depressing thought. They're just not, a lot of those are not quickly acquirable skills. So they're things, maybe some of them have to be innate and some of them have to be bred in very, very early. So that's not a question, just a comment, my thought from listening to what you said.
Yeah, I mean, if I could respond to that. Yeah, I think one of the things we're trying to do here is, with my kind of visiting university professor hat on, is trying to actually set that agenda early on, because I agree with you that the way massive generalisation about universities around the world, but a lot of them is still very siloed in the way they actually operate. So I think, yeah, you do have to kind of start young, as it were, and actually build those skills in. At a slightly more positive note, I think there's always time to think about how you can, reboot a particular skill. I mean, one of the interesting twists with this is there could be big winners in this AI thing. It could be people that feel they have been disadvantaged through the current education system because it's all rather left brain and didn't progress their skills. They could feel liberated by working with the AI, and they could find themselves sort of leapfrogging up the chain and having these skills, these kind of creative entrepreneurial skills that are valued, that puts them at an advantage. So I'm just trying to find this happy balance between agreeing with you about these are difficult skills to acquire, you've got to be embedded young, but there are opportunities to kind of, lifelong learning and all that, and seize that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, we have a project for a government in Australia preventing and countering violent extremism, and one of the objectives in trying to achieve that with the audience is typically younger male, lower socioeconomic, suffering often combinations of disruptive aspects of their life, including mental health issues. And one of the goals that we are to try and work out is how to make them better critical thinkers, so they can resist the temptation of the tunnels they're being taken down on. And I keep telling the government it's a horseshit objective. You can't make them critical thinkers. They are already what they are, and that would have had to have started at a much younger age to do that. So it's things like this where you get confronted with the reality of people being in situations where you can't acquire these skills.
I'm tempted to go down a cricket route and say if you're tempted to play the hook shot and we want
You're
to
gonna
iron
play
it
the
out of
hook
the game,
shot.
you're
That's
going to
right.
play the hook shot. You can't, or can you iron it out of the game? I think that's a separate conference, yeah.
That's the Poms at Headingley, I know. Yeah, they couldn't help it. Yeah.
I think, yeah, what I think we're trying to avoid is sort of this council of despair. And so, yeah, you'd like to think that people can make some progress on some of these things, irrespective of who they are. But I think I feel a lot more comfortable about what's coming than perhaps a lot of people here. And I think, people will find they can't do this. There will be a group of people who find they cannot do this, and then there's a whole nother conversation about what happens to society then, which is far bigger than this.
I mean, that would be, like, for example, in training, we got a little thing, we turn it around, we've got where there's a will, there's a way. We turn that round. Where there's a way, there's a will, meaning if people make a small start, that gives them motivation to do more. So you create a kind of virtuous circle of improving competence, which improves confidence, which improves confidence. So there's got to be a belief that that people can move up the ladder. So I agree that some people it's very, very difficult, but everybody I think can do a little bit more to actually make themselves more AI ready. Sorry, forgive the cricket analogies if for those of you not into. I do rugby and football as well. Sorry. Yeah.
David, thank you. So you were talking about the T-shaped teams. What does it depths? What does depths mean?
It's not a concept from us, but it's a concept that's been around long. It's the idea that you're building a kind of high-function team, and the idea that everybody needs to know a little bit about what. So if you're working in an insight agency, if you are a kind of a stato, you can't say, I faint every time I'm asked to do a depth interview, or you're a qualitative researcher, when you show a number, you collapse to the ground. You've got to know a little bit about everything that's done, but meanwhile you have your specialism, so you could be a specialist, a group discussion moderator, but you've got a reasonable skills across the top of the T about what the whole agency would do. And we use that because I was just saying it's quite a way of, almost back to your point, that you can actually hang on to the way you're accessing AI through your specialist area and then gradually broaden around this polymath idea. So it's not suddenly hitting you. Well, David Smith and Adam Riley are telling me to be a polymath, thinking, how do I do that overnight? You can ease your way in it through your own particular specialism.
Thank you. Another question. You have mentioned the book, Forward Thinking, name of the book, or?
The book is called The Invention of Tomorrow, and it's by Professor Sudenberg, and he's writing on this topic of the human beings as a kind of time machine. And the point I was making there, taking our experiences of the past and helping us guide us to what we want to see in the future. And it's over and above just some sort of trend analysis. It's really adding that human dimension into identifying possible plausible futures that we all want to see as a society.
And one more
Okay.
clarification.
Sorry, I had it.
Yes. Yeah, as I remember, you told that if you want to be different, be creative. Who said this one? If you want to be...
Coco Chanel.
I see. Okay, thank you.
If you want to be irreplaceable, be different. There's loads of... again, I mean, but back to this point here, that you've got the idea of creativity as something that drifts down from the muse, and some people have got it and some haven't. And you've got this other idea of creativity is a very disciplined business, and that as insight professionals, we start with the problem. So if you think of creativity as we are solving problems, as creativity, that all of a sudden makes it accessible, not, oh, I'm never going to be creative. So there is this midpoint between those with this natural ability and finding a way of cultivating that skill.
There's a question there.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Really interesting. But it just seems to me, at the danger of sounding really simplistic, I mean, just hearing the conversation that happened, it sounds to me with the 7 superpower skills, I mean, I could actually reduce them down to, like, it sounds like it's saying, be more human. I mean, that would be the thing that would really differentiate us from AI. I mean, come with more of a personality. Number 7, inspiring action, bring more personality, more empathy, listen more, try and be more of a solution than a part of the problem. When it comes to creative edge, I mean, each of these 7 traits, I could sort of like just be more human. It almost sounds like that. And again, I could be really being really simplistic here, but that's really, I think, the thing that's really going to differentiate us from AI and maybe keep us in our jobs.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, you know, if you're doing a presentation or training, you know, you can start with, you know, what is your big idea and point of view, and well done. You know, I think, you know, you've summed that up. But if you're going into training, you want to chunk it down. If you just said that to someone, people say, well, where do we go next? So we've tried to actually chunk it down. But you're right. When we're doing training, it's tricky because in a way you're doing it sequentially and linearly, but actually you're doing all these things together. Kind of, it's like they merge together. So in training, we actually start off by chunking it down into each individual element, but then it's the idea of how you put it together. If you had a challenge, you know, how would you actually operate? So yeah, I can only but agree with you, really. Yeah.
And I mean, this is about understanding what AI will do and what it can't do for the foreseeable future, and then how do we sort of expand our capabilities in the area that it just isn't very good at operating in. And you know, that idea of, you know, we can identify what it is to be human and the essence of being human, and as David said, they're kind of breaking that down into these kind of different elements around, you know, creativity and the ability to you know, to kind of work with fuzzy logic, and all those kind of things are what at the moment are our point of differentiation, which we need to develop and big up, because a lot of the stuff that historically has differentiated us, a lot of the skill and the experience that we have drawn on and has, you know, paid us a salary and those kind of things, will no longer be relevant. So you have to find that extra bit.
So I mean, again, I don't want to go into a sort of long lecture, but I mean, if some of it is about, it sounds a bit precious, you know, development of conceptual frameworks. So you've got the idea of trying to encourage universities to not teach in silos. So you move up to the idea of it's multidisciplinary. I mean, okay, we're getting an economics guy and a sociologist and they talk about that. Then you move up to interdisciplinary. Well, can't you guys somehow kind of put those things together? But we're saying you go beyond that. I don't know what the word is, like where you need new concepts that you're drawing from that need to be created. I gave my little example of the idea of a weight, power, direction, fuzzy logic framework, the idea of merging what Seth Godin saying about linchpin with the work that's coming out on so you're getting to new frameworks that are being driven by the idea of you're thinking in a more polymath way. So that's slightly counter what you said earlier. Oh, well, it's all done and dusted, we know this. Not really. It is up to a point. That's a good summary of what we said. But there's work to be done with these frameworks. And then back to your point, getting that taught within the school and university system, people coming into the industry and then delivering on what we think people want from us.
Well, thank you so much. I think we've had quite an insightful discussion. David and Adam, they're very close to SMR. Actually, they're regular contributors to Research World. So if you want to continue the conversation, they're very, very easy to find. And I'm sure that they're going to hang around if you want to elaborate on a few more topics.